Hi, everybody. So I guess we should get started. I'm startled by the number of people in this room, because we said it was about HR. Normally people go running down the corridor the other way if I say we're going to talk about HR. I'm Nancy Hauge. I'm the Chief People Experience Officer at Automation Anywhere. And my colleague, my lovely sidekick here, Forrest White, is going to partner up with me and walk you through a little bit of our journey and what we see happening and how we think automation plus AI is going to change HR forever. So, do we close the door or leave it open? Thank you. Okay. Alrighty, safe harbor statement. Everybody has seen this every time you've gone into one of these sessions, right? You've seen that? You've read it? There's a quiz. Okay. Keep going. Okay. HR in the age of intelligent automation as opposed to the marginally intelligent people who've been running HR for the last 40 or 50 years, namely me. And there I am. How about that? Okay, let's keep going. You know, pre-pandemic, there were different imperatives about HR. We were very worried, I think, as we always had been, about talent scarcity, right? A lot of what was going on in 2018, 2019 was, wow, there's not enough talent. Where are we going to find it? Recruiting was through the roof. It was just amazing. We also always have performance and efficiency issues. That's just been the hallmark of what HR has done since the dawn of HR with the dawn of the industrial age. And also changing social norms. I don't know if you remember, but in 2019, one of the big issues we were talking about was how we were going to use pronouns in the workplace. Remember that? And so those were the big issues that we were kind of grappling with in 2019, and then we had a pandemic, and the world changed. And suddenly what occurred was we started to be very concerned about a global productivity crisis. And not just the slowdown of a supply chain, but the actual productivity, particularly in industrialized nations, where what we saw was the elderly population, the baby boomer population, was going to place demands on social infrastructure that the workforce could no longer support. And so we had just a basic productivity issue. In the United States, when Social Security was created, there were 43 workers to support every single elderly person. Today it's 3. That's a productivity issue. And that's a major issue for our society. And it's one of those things that we have to figure out how we're going to fix, or we will see a crumbling. We can see what's happened in Japan, right? Whole towns have been abandoned because they could no longer support their social infrastructure. The elderly had to move someplace else. There simply are not enough workers in the UK, in Japan, in South Korea, in the United States to support the population as it needs to be supported. So that really is our global productivity crisis. We still have a talent scarcity issue, and we have a multiple generation issue in the workplace. We're not graduating enough engineers anywhere anymore, particularly in the United States, we're not. And in the other countries that we have been importing engineers from, they've slowed down as well. And so that's a concern in terms of how, kind of how we're going to get the talent that we need and how are we going to augment that talent. The other thing is the future of work is going to be customized, I believe. We saw that a bit with Mahir. We've seen that kind of all day. The people who are entering the workforce today and the people who are about to leave the workforce want the exact same thing, which is autonomy, control over their time, flexibility. Those are things that are really, really in demand right now for the knowledge-based workforce. So there is not the big generational gap that we see in terms of their demands. They're pretty much the same thing. Now here's the thing. In the future, we're going to have to provide individual solutions in a volume process, fairly orthogonal to the industrial age, where it was a single solution in quality in a volume process. So we are going to have to disabuse ourselves of many of the models we've used in the industrial age, pardon me. And we're going to have to think differently about what that throughput process yields to us. And it's going to have to yield a customized solution. You're going to have to forgive me. I'm getting over a cold, so I'm having a hard time here. And finally, the emphasis on human and human resources. Through the pandemic, we suddenly got away from being, I'll say, the HR team as puny business partners. And that's really kind of what we were. I don't know any other function in the company that runs around saying, I'm your business partner. So HR has always been this forelock tugging, really, I know something about business too, as opposed to being very proud of the fact that we are behavioralists. Our job is to know what will make human beings thrive in the workplace. Now, over the course of the 2 years of the pandemic, we discovered that we had to really lead with, were people healthy? What was their well-being? What was the well-being of their families? Because we were all mostly remote. Was everybody in this room primarily remote? Yes? Okay. Suddenly we got this glimpse into people's lives. I remember particularly early in the pandemic, we were in a meeting, early Zoom meeting. A young man who works at our company was making probably his first presentation to the executive team. And he was a little nervous, and he's got his PowerPoint up there, and you can see him, you can see the speaker and the PowerPoint. And there's something that's coming through the background behind him, just something keeps popping through it. And suddenly, somebody hands a tiny baby over his shoulder. He's in the middle of his presentation. Boom, this baby lands, just boom. And you could tell Mom had had it. It was his shift. She didn't care what he was doing. Somehow, it was his turn. And so there he is in this presentation, and he just kind of keeps going with this little baby. I will never look at him the same. I will never, ever look at him the same. But the same thing with the people whose dogs jumped in their lap. We could see their kids in the background. We could see their artwork in the books. Suddenly, we knew them as people. And so we couldn't think about them as the volume of human resources. We couldn't think of them that way anymore. We have to lead with human. Resources is something we should never have called people. It's not like they're natural gas, right? It's not a resource that we're going to use up like that. We have to lead with human. It's one of the things that I love about Automation Anywhere, and you heard me here talk about it this morning, is that the mission of the organization is to make certain that we improve the lives of human beings. The mission is to make certain that every process is the most effective it can be. That would be great. It really is to open up cranial capacity in the human being that has been locked down through the entire industrial age. That's the mission of the company. How do we open up that capacity? How do we get access to the knowledge that sits inside people's heads, to the creativity, to the innovation? That's what we do. Okay. So, staying ahead of the curve from HR, we've got some things ahead of us. First of all, we have to keep putting humans at the center. We have to lead with the human part of human resources and not the puny business partner and not the silly resources thought. But we do have to improve efficiency and productivity. Now, most times when you say those words in the past, particularly with an industrial age model, human beings instantly thought about, oh, what are you going to ask me to do? Right? Well, how are you going to criticize me? Productivity, efficiency. What are you going to demand of me, and what am I doing wrong? We have to also try to get those terms to be terms that people embrace around how do I make the work that I'm doing more productive? How do I make it more efficient? And make it not so much about the human is not efficient, the human is not productive, but the work and the method that they do it doesn't lead to the productivity and efficiency we want. We have to help people fulfill their hopes and dreams. In the post-industrial age, with knowledge-based workers, it's not a unilateral arrangement that we've got here. This is not a unilateral contract. There is a covenant that we engage with people that say, come and work with us and we will help contribute to you as well. We're going to make certain that if you share your hopes and dreams, you tell me what you want to accomplish, we're going to help you make some investments there as well. And that's hard to do in a volume process, that industrial age throughput process. You're going to have help to do that. And then, of course, we have to make the significant business impact from a human resources perspective, and we call it people experience at Automation Anywhere. That's why I'm CPXO. We have to be able to find the talent where it sits in the organization today. Think about the creative deployment of that talent. Again, it's still hidden from us through all the business processes we use. How do we discover it? The first bot we ever wrote at Automation Anywhere was to count heads, and that would have been in 2018. There was a young woman who counted the heads for us. We were growing very rapidly. We had a whole bunch of recs open. We were hiring very quickly, and we were in a bunch of countries. We'd gone into a lot of them before we actually knew what we were doing. And so we had a lot of PEOs. We had 2 payroll systems. We had a HRIS system. We had an applicant tracking system. And in order to count heads, she had to go into all of them and pull it all together, figure out who belonged in that list and who were the interns and who were contractors. It took about 4 hours to do that, twice a week. And then she got to go around to every executive and say, here's where your head count is. And here's what you're going to hire, and this is what's in process. She got a lot of visibility. It was great. But it was really painful to do that. We automated it. Suddenly, we could get that report in 90 seconds. We automated it. It was just instant. And with the company growing that rapidly, that was fabulous. But she was not as happy about that. Sarah was her name. And so we said, well, Sarah, what can you do? And she said, well, you know, we need an intern program. And I've been thinking about it. So we took the 10 hours a week that she was working on headcount, and we turned it into an intern program, and she designed our first intern program, and suddenly, same visibility. She still got to go around and talk to all the executives, but this time she was talking about the future. Here's how we're going to invest in creating an engineering workforce for you. Here's what we're going to do for the marketing organization. Here's what we're going to do. It wasn't looking over her shoulder with old data. It was really making that investment into the future. That's driving the organization. Okay, what's the challenge for HR? We're really challenged by the moment we have. HR is generally laggards when it comes to adopting new technology. We're usually the last. We almost never drive it. With this technology, though, what we see now, a couple of things. First of all, if we're going to be relevant, we're going to have to be the experts in this. It is so fundamental to the way people will work, the way they do work and they will work in the future. We better be the experts in this particular phase of technology. We are going to have to be very involved in defining the role of the technology inside the company, how it will be used, kind of how it affects people's jobs, that sort of thing. And we certainly are going to help set guidelines and guardrails. When Gen AI first got a bunch of press and talk about it, was that March that it really kind of exploded into the marketplace. The first thing everybody in HR talked about is, oh my God, how will we control this puppy? Oh my God, where's the guardrails? Up, just frantic about those rules that HR likes to put in place. I think that what we have to really think about is how are we actually going to use it? What are the opportunities it's going to provide? The guardrails will come, right? People will figure out how to manage it company by company. So setting those limits is one thing. But if we're not totally fluent in this language, if we don't fully understand what it does, if we don't fully understand what the capabilities are, HR is irrelevant. Just that blunt. We just lose our impact into the organization every day. Okay. So, I don't have a very big team. What do we have, 30 people in the HR and TA function today? But 14,000 hours last year was done by automation. So for us, that's about 10 full-time heads that we got the capacity of against 30 people. Now, I took this job in 2017. I am officially 3 years older than God. You can see. I know you're thinking, what could a woman close to 80 be doing telling you about the future? I'm actually not close to 80, but for a minute you thought I'd look pretty good, didn't you? Anyway, this is about 10 full-time equivalents for us, which is a huge amount of capacity that it freed up for us. Certainly did the work perfectly, right? A bot's always going to do it perfectly. Automation's always going to show up on time, do it well, never going to miss a beat. But it's what it opened up for us to do, the other things it gave us access to, which is the really important and powerful value added that it created. So we have probably 50 digital assistants running today at any given time, right? And so here are a few of my favorites. Now you all have automations, I assume. We've moved from not just automating processes that existed, but to create processes through automation that you would never do if you're only going to use humans. And so, as I describe it, automation has given me access to my if-only list. So for, 39 years, I thought, God, there's a big list of things I'd love to do, and I can never get the time. I never have enough resources. And suddenly, I have access to it. And no HR person ever said, gee, if only I didn't have to do this executive development, I could get back to data entry and analysis, right? So, but that's just it. Suddenly, we have access to all sorts of things. Now, we have an on-demand compensation analysis automation that is just the sexiest thing you've ever seen. I'll give you a quick example. Let's say our CTO wants to do a promotion for somebody. And he's got a people experience partner who's sitting in his office, and they're talking about it, and she says, well, I'm going to go away and talk to comp, come back in 2 days and tell you what we should do. Nope. We have a co-pilot that she can just call up while she's there, and that little puppy goes out and looks at that person and all internal peers for the promoted position, looks at market data and shows the analysis there, says where they are in equity, and recommends all the adjustments. That fast. 2 days, saved, don't have to go to comp. It's fabulous, just amazing. HRS data integrity, simple, right? We need to make certain that the data that's in one system looks like the data in the other. It just goes back and forth and makes certain things are correct. Let's see, what's really sexy in there? Our document filer was interesting. It looks so boring, but when we moved from one system to another, one HRS system to another, all that unstructured data would have taken thousands of hours to move over manually. And I think the bot did it in 3 days, something like that. And we got that, we don't use that every day. We use a piece of it every day, document filer. We don't use the whole automation every day. But anytime you have a merger and acquisition, think about how helpful that automation is when you have volumes of new people that you have to put into a system or taking them from one system to another. That's magic. It just takes way too much time for a human being to have to go through and move unstructured data from one system to another. Probably my favorite is our talent review and development planning process. And I'm going to talk in more detail about that, but I think we're going to do something else first, aren't we?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about this?
Oh, yes, what it gave us access to. So, by creating those 14,000 hours of excess capability, we created a talent review, talent development, engagement program that allowed us to think more about outcomes and not about process. One of the things about automation that strikes me, and I could be wrong, it feels like it's the first set of tools that actually is in service of the human. If you think about every other piece of software, every other tool you use, don't you feel as though you're constantly serving it, inputting data, you're constantly, you are some sort of input device to that capital equipment. This is the first kind of capital investment I've ever seen that I actually think really is in service of the human. And that's what it has provided us here. So yeah, the on-demand comp analysis, there's certainly background work that you have to do if you're going to do something that's a developmental with automation, but that's the interesting work. What should the interventions be? That's the interesting work for a PX person. So we have intern programs, License to Lead. We have an executive coaching program that most companies our size would never have. We have a thing called Team Impact for the top 15% of the organization. These are development rotations, all primarily through one process that we created called TESS. And as I said, I'm going to show you TESS in a minute. But Forrest has really sexy stuff to show you first. And so why don't we do that?
All right.
And see if I can get my voice to come back.
So I'm taking the risk of doing a couple live demos. So we'll do my best here. So the first one I'm going to do is called sentiment analysis. So the idea here is, the way we use it, we do a quarterly employee survey, and in that survey, we always ask some of the same multiple choice questions. But then at the end, we always have an open text box so somebody can leave comments and let us know how they're feeling. It takes a lot of effort and mental capacity to be able to read through all of those comments, potentially, depending on the size of your company, many thousands, and make sense of it. You know, is it good? Is it bad? Is it indifferent? Is there anything in particular we need to know? And so, and people carry their own biases, right? And so what we wanted to do was use automation that's now leveraging both Copilot and generative AI to help us understand what's happening in our company and go from having this take like, 2 months to be able to get insights from survey data to 5 minutes. So I'm going to demo that for you right now. So I'm in Microsoft Teams, and I've got my automation Copilot. I'm just going to go ahead and just kick this. And it says I'm offline. All right, that's the risk of a live demo here. Guys in the back, is there a different Wi-Fi network I should be using?
Try the Imagine 2023, and then the password is Imagine 2023, capital I.
Capital I.
Yeah.
I know, come up here, man.
Yeah, we have.
All right, come on. There we go. So let's go back.
So Forrest runs total rewards and global total rewards and also technology for us in the HR organization. We have 2 folks who write automations in addition to Forrest. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so what this is going to do is I'm just going to basically browse for a file that has all the comments in it. This is, of course, imaginary information. So I've picked a file, and we have some pre-programmed prompts. So we can run a prompt that pulls out positive themes, neutral themes, negative themes, and also prompts that will, again, pull out those specific comments. There's something that a person needs to see, like, somebody thinks that there's fraud happening in the company. We want to make sure a person sees those so we can pull those out for us. So I'm just going to run this with positive themes. Or, by the way, you can create your own if you want to just try that out. And I'm just going to put in my email. What's that? And submit. So right now it's taking, queuing up the automation, going and taking the file that we attached, pinging our Gen AI tool that we're using through API connections, serving it up the file, sending it the prompt against the file, and then receiving the responses back. So this takes just a minute for it to run. And again, I think one of the things that we're excited about is like this kind of concept is not just applicable to employee surveys, right? Anytime you need to be able to run some sort of an analysis on a large data set of text, could be from customer feedback, could be from QA, could be from tickets that you're collecting through a ticketing system. We just happen to be using this for an employee survey. So we can see it's running. Just take a couple more seconds.
How many employees is the file that you're using?
About 1,500. Yeah. We trained this originally on a very small set of comments because we wanted to make sure that the analysis we were getting back was good, or it made sense to us. And then we kind of grew that from there to make sure that through the prompt training process that everything's going to be sound. So it's a
Tell
little bit.
us about the training steps. What did it take to train?
Yeah, so we actually tried a couple different, like I guess probably 4 different generative AI tools and tested every single one of them against the set of comments that we had in order to see which one was going to give us the kind of output we felt was the most useful, the most digestible. And once we had picked the one that we wanted to use, then we started working on how do we tweak the words in the prompts just to be able to get it to give us something that was like actionable information. So sort of a bulleted list of things, right? And we didn't want it to be 30 different observations. We wanted it to be like 5 or 6. So we started building in those prompts to kind of shrink everything down to the size we wanted. And then again, it was just a matter of starting with a small group of comments and then kind of growing that out as we went. So I'm going to attribute this to the speed of our internet here, but We may have to scrub this if it's not, here we go.
There you go.
Oh, darn it. Didn't work for some reason. So every once in a while we have an API connection issue. So I'm going to jump into the other demo, which is our job description generator. So the idea here is if you're a recruiter, you're a hiring manager, you need to build a job description because you're going to post a job, or you're thinking about creating a new job. Or maybe you have a job description library, and because you're creating a new job internally, you need to create a job description for it. Most people, I'm pointing at myself here, when I have to do that, I usually go to the internet, I'll do a search for that job, I'll find a few job descriptions, and I'll kind of grab the pieces that I like and try to make it my own. So the idea here is that we can use generative AI to do that and create something original. So I'm just going to say, let's call this a financial analyst. And I want this job description to emphasize some things like business partnership, financial planning, and one from the crowd.
Rockstar.
Rockstar reporting? Okay, Rockstar reporting. All right, we'll say this is in Austin, Texas. And we put in my email. So the idea here is that you're going to get, a job description that's basically 80 to 90% final. This is a draft, and this is not applicable. We're just going to drop in some fake numbers here. So, because there's all of these financial analyst job descriptions out in the world, we can, basically kind of build ours out of this giant library of information. So. What we've done is programmed some things into this prompt that makes it more specific to our company. And we can also build this so that it will add all of your boilerplate language. If you've got equal opportunity employment that you want to include some brief description about your company at the top, it can do all those things. So basically right now it's just sending the request to, hopefully we don't have the same issue we had with the other one, but this is a different Gen AI tool, so maybe it'll be successful.
Is this a model you trained yourself?
Yes. Okay. So here we go. So what this has done is basically giving me the draft here. At this point, I can make tweaks to the comments if I wanted to. Otherwise, I can scroll down and see the job description that was created, including our Rockstar reporting. And it's going to give competencies, how to know if you're a good fit, what we need from this role. And then again, as the hiring manager or recruiter, I can go and tweak this at this point and then post it online. So just another kind of a fun use case where we're able to embed these tools, by the way, in your recruiting system. Because we have Copilot, you don't have to go to Microsoft Teams necessarily or to your control room. You can launch this right from wherever you have a need to be able to create these job descriptions. So, all right.
Okay. You guys all know, automation in our world allows us to eliminate bias, improve productivity, increase accuracy and compliance. The compliance thing I always forget about, I know it's important, and enhance the teammate experience. Those are the things that we think of as the goals for automation for us. If you go to the next one, we want to talk a little bit about a use case that we have, and this is the thing I talked to you about called TESS. TESS is what we use for customized manager engagement and retention tools. We also are planning on using it for development and also for some impact management, which is my language for performance. So here are our challenges. First of all, we needed to eliminate bias in what we think of as that, do you know the traditional 9-box taxonomy, that where you have, I think it's performance on the Y, and generally you have potential right on the X. We've replaced potential with impact, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. We wanted to make certain that we had less bias in that process, that it was not just a single individual's opinion kind of placing somebody in a box. We wanted to go as data-driven as we could with that. Also on compensation decisions and development investment. We spend a lot of time talking about, how do we best use our dollars for investing in the population? Where do we want to, target those dollars? And then we certainly wanted to provide greater capability to managers in terms of engagement and retention and impact management, where they saw people perhaps were not performing as well as they potentially could. What kind of interventions could we provide to those folks? So we had some raw materials. We have what we refer to as our currencies of retention. I'll go quickly through those in a second. There are 8 currencies that we believe exist in every organization. Many of them are very overlooked. The 9-box taxonomy and our desire to make it far more objective and not so subjective. And finally, our ability to automate. So that's what we had as kind of our raw materials as we headed into creating this program. So here are the currencies of retention. Now, there are 2 that are overwhelming. One is the mission of your company is a currency. People stay with you because they believe in the mission of the company. You have to continue, though, to make down payments on it to make certain that people stay connected to it. That's kind of that connected at the kitschis kind of connection. The other one is the very first piece of all compensation is respect. So we'll take those 2, are the first currencies of compensation. Then you have cash, fairly short term. As we all know, that gets kind of consumed emotionally and intellectually pretty fast, as well as out of the wallet. Equity, for those companies that use equity, it has a kind of a mid-range holding power. Generally halfway through the vesting period, people start thinking about should they get more equity in you or should they go looking for some at another company. Development, very long term. If people know you're investing in their development, they'll stay twice as long as equity holds them, probably 4 times as long as cash. Recognition is another midterm. The attaboys, thank you very much, great job. That has some psychic income. If you do it frequently enough, you can keep holding people, but you have to remember it has a shelf life. Time, the autonomy over time, time as a currency, allowing people to use time as they see fit as adults in this world, has also a holding power when folks know that you trust them with the currency of time. And then finally, visibility, the concept that someone knows about you 2 tiers above you in the organization. They know your name, they know what you do, and they're watching out for you in some way. That'll hold people longer than equity. Longer than equity. It's very interesting. So thinking about all of those, that's kind of some of our raw material. Now, what we did is we said, look, what we think is most important is relevance of a role and then how a person performs in it. And so we changed that 9-box, to relevance and performance, and said, look, if you're in a highly relevant role and you're doing very well, you're having the greatest impact in the organization probably. The less relevant roles, you could do great in them. You could do great, but the job simply isn't as relevant to the mission of the company. Now I know our egalitarian world, we say, but isn't everything relative? Really not. I have to tell you, my HR folks know that compared to somebody in the product world, we're probably a little less relevant to the future impact of the company. Dawn, I'm sorry to tell you, hon, that's just where we are. Okay? So we thought this was a better way to look at it because we really thought it was a way of measuring impact in the organization. And impact probably is more impactful than trying to manage performance per se, and certainly potential. Let's keep going. So we created this program called TESS, Talent Engagement and Sustained Success. There's also, I think, an urban definition of someone who's so cool they must be a TESS. Okay, so this is the workflow of the automation. The first thing that happens is the manager answers a series of questions, about 43 on a variety of vectors. One is relevance of the role. Next, what is the person's performance in that role? Then there is, what kind of a corporate citizen is this person? Do they live the values? And then finally, it is, how sticky are they? And what do you think the retention risk is in the next year? And those, most of that then charts them onto the 9-box. It's the answers to those questions that position someone in the 9-box taxonomy. Concurrently, our teammates are answering a question about how they feel they're doing in their careers. What's their level of satisfaction? And so there's a variety of questions that on all of our currencies, as well as, do you have friends in the workplace? Do you have a best friend? What do you think about your boss? Are you trusted? Do you trust them? So we have also those questions that are answered. And we have an automation that then scores and identifies some of those trends. And then what happens, we've got a set of automations that creates an individualized plan for every single one of those teammates based on, first of all, where are they in that 9 box, and then all the answers that they gave us about how the world is going for them. Let's take a look at that. So, manager completes their 43 questions on every teammate. Some of the questions are asked a couple of times in different ways, and that's one of the ways we're trying to avoid that bias thing, that first impression that, right, if you come at it through a couple of different lenses, you may get a more robust answer. This creates an enormous amount of data, just an enormous amount of data. And by the way, we have the questions weighted because some questions are more relevant in some groups than they are in other groups. And so that's one of the things we got a lot of that time back. This is one of the things we did with that time, is make certain that this program worked that well, that it was that customized. So, and then you can see up here, this is tiny, I know, but then the automation places folks in the 9 box. The other thing you need to know is the boxes aren't equal. We get to set what is a high level of performance. We get to set what is a high level of relevance. We literally can move the bar of achievement every year in order to make certain that we really understand where we have very discrete high performance and high relevance. Okay, the teammate does their experience career survey, and then a document gets produced by the automations. We're going to drill into that a little bit. First page. Okay, so this is the first page. Very simple. It shows where the person ended up on the 9 box. It says who they are, and it gives a little bit of the comp data. And again, no person touched this. It went into the systems and pulled this out itself. The next page is way fun. So here, first of all, the risk assessment, it compares what did the manager think versus what did we glean from the employees' answers, the teammates' answers. So there's something to explore, because in this case, the manager thought they were pretty high risk. And it turns out the teammates said, kind of low risk. I'm not thinking about leaving. So that's interesting. And then what were the things that the teammates said are really working for them? And so here are the things that are really making them stay right now. These are the things they're really enjoying about their career. On the other side, there's some compensation information at the top. And then, rather than say, and here's the things that aren't working for them, we don't say, instead of saying they feel trusted, you don't say over here, but they don't trust you. We don't have that, right? Instead, we have interventions. And so rather than say, here's the thing that makes them unhappy, we say, here's some things you need to do to make certain that you can re-engage them or add to their engagement. Don't screw around with these things. Make certain you're keeping these pretty happy. But here are the things, and they're prescriptive. More than that, go to the next page. We lay them out on a calendar and say, this is what you should do in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. We say, you need to spend a certain amount of your one-on-one time with these folks on these topics during this quarter. And it is everything from, well, take a look at their OKRs and make certain they understand their relevance to the overall strategy. Something that simple to check in on their family health and mood. Make certain that that family still are partners in retention. Make certain that the family still supports their staying at Automation Anywhere. So this is customized for every teammate. It's different. And every manager gets it. And they can just pull it up before every one-on-one and say, what should I be doing today? What should I be thinking about? Now, when we piloted this with a group out of engineering, right, 3 years ago, the turnover rate in that group was minuscule compared to the rest of the company. Minuscule compared to the rest of engineering. And so we understood that this process was adding value to us in terms of that retention piece. And it seems to be our voluntary turnover rate has dropped dramatically since we started with this program, just dramatically. So I love this like a fat kid loves a ho-ho. This is, I mean, I've waited a long time to be able to do anything like this, to be able to give individuals the focus and attention they needed as individuals, and not the herd mentality that we have approached human beings with through the industrial age. Put them in a pen called a workplace, call them employees, find one-size-fits-all solutions for human beings. Those days are just over, and they can only be over through automation. So how do we use TESS for compensation? We look at that. We look at their current comp ratio, and we look at their 9-box placement, and we have a fully automated compensation program based on that. We have centralized compensation. Managers are going to look at it. They get their input, of course, but they don't start. They start with this, as opposed to starting with opinion. Equity, same thing. Market data, we look at their unvested equity, and we have a multiplier that sits in that 9-box that tells us this is what the multiplier should be of what an average grant based on where they are in the 9-box grid. And then it has given us such capability of being able to invest in the folks that have the greatest impact. It has really shown us who we need to give more visibility to, where we need to put recognition dollars, where we need to invest in folks' careers. It's been just eye-opening for that. So, and rich data drives more. We have a lot of insight into the high-impact folks and can tell you who's loose in the socket, who are the most relevant to the future that are also loose in the socket, and be very, very, very focused on our interventions there. We do think there's more work to be done in terms of driving biases out of all these processes. We have to rethink some questions. We retool. We're in the second iteration of really thinking through some of the questions. But that's, again, the higher added value work that HR is doing these days rather than data entry. And our ability to change the threshold and raise the bar on the performance and the relevance piece means that we have built in kind of a continuous improvement program, just eking it up a little bit. It also means that we can, once people are hip to the deal and they say, oh, I think that this is going to drive people's compensation, so I probably better score people a little higher, I just move the bar a little bit. Right? As they learn and they start to push people forward, we keep moving that bar. So we had 1,300 teammates all increasing their impact through this across the organization. So, and as I said, it probably is the most exciting thing I've done in a 40-year career, is be part of this. It's just thrilling to me. Thrilling and terrifying. Okay, so I've not seen this slide before. Okay, that's it.